Bonjour à tous, and welcome everyone to our virtual conference on the single-use plastic ban, issue and challenges presented by NSF International. In June 2019, Prime Minister Trudeau announced a ban on the single-use plastic in Canada. What are the implications for business? This is a topic that Carol will try to explain by outlining the current state of the plastic waste issue, information about an ambitious zero plastic waste plan, and innovative ideas to decrease plastic waste. Carol Zwiep is a senior manager in the packaging, product development, and compliance expertise for NSF since 2002. She manages departments that perform product and process innovation work, packaging and shelf life studies, as well as a review and assist in the food regulatory and labeling projects. Carol has delivered courses, judged competitions, SIAL innovation sometimes, and written trade magazine articles on packaging. Prior to joining NSF International, Carol worked at Amcor Rigid Plastics in various roles ranging from managing quality department and working in the research and development to build the corporate technical center. Carol has a Bachelor of Science degree in the biochemistry from Queen's University and a Master of Science degree from McMaster University. Carol is also a lifetime certified packaging professional through the Institute of Packaging Professionals. She is also very involved in our show. She is one of our experts since 2015, specialized in packaging, and she has been involved also many times in our SIAL innovation content. Carol, it is my great pleasure to leave you the floor right now.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Xavier, for that very nice introduction. I am very pleased to be presenting to you today. As Xavier mentioned, I work at NSF in Canada, and I am the Senior Manager of Packaging, Product Development, and Compliance. So I will take off my video and put it back on at the end of the presentation, and I welcome any questions at that time. So what will I talk about today? Here's an outline of what I'm going to be presenting. I'll first present you a few slides on our organization and services. And although the main subject of my talk is the single-use plastic ban, I thought it would be very pertinent that I talk about sustainable packaging, because the single-use plastic ban is part of the sustainable packaging issue. Then I'll go into what are the plastics and packaging waste issues. What does plastic and the environment impact? And also the issue with marine waste, as well as the single-use plastic ban in Europe and in Canada. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how the pandemic has affected the use of single-use plastic. I will then go into the current state of our plastic packaging waste in Canada, and then talk about landfilling compostable packaging and the state of the current recycling industry in Canada. I will finish off with some future trends in sustainable packaging and some closing remarks. So NSF, we are an independent, not-for-profit organization dedicated to providing services to improve public health and safety. So what are our contributions to public health and safety? Well, we are a developer of many national standards and published protocols. We also have ties with key association and government agencies, including the World Health Organization. We are a service provider to thousands of organizations and companies in 180 countries. We're truly global. However, we do have a location in Guelph, Ontario. We were known as the Guelph Food Technology Center, and in 2013, we were purchased by NSF International. So we still offer the same services as we did when we were the Guelph Food Technology Center. This includes certification and verification, food safety and quality consulting, training and education, and technical services. So I am responsible for all of the technical services, which include product and process innovation, packaging and package testing, food and label compliance services. So let me talk about sustainable packaging first, just to put this whole waste issue into context. This is the classic definition of sustainable packaging put forward by the Sustainable Packaging Coalition. There are 8 parts to the definition, but what I'd like to point out is 3 specific ones that is of my particular focus. So meeting market criteria for performance and cost. We can think about sustainable packaging, but we have to make sure that it still performs in a suitable manner. And of course, cost is important. Maximizing the use of renewable or recycled source materials. And last of all, is it made from materials healthy in the end of life scenarios? So again, what is the best option for sustainable packaging? One has to consider very important things such as the product and the product needs. We need to ensure that it has the physical properties to protect the product from crushing, but also perhaps the barrier properties, either light or oxygen barrier, to preserve the contents of the package. We also have to consider the functionality. Does it open and close properly? Things such as performance, again, physical strength, barrier properties, and last of all, the cost also is very important. So here are some things to consider when you're trying to choose the best sustainable packaging. It is always difficult to decide which has the lower environmental impacts, and it's not always straightforward. So for example, baby food, is it better in a plastic container or a glass jar? So what you're doing is weighing the lightweight material, which is sustainable, versus the recyclability of the glass jar. What about a beer bottle? If it is an aluminum can, the beer in an aluminum can, or a glass beer bottle. One is very energy intensive, and the glass is a very heavy package. And last of all, we're talking about recycled content. So a 75-gram box with 85% recycled content, or a lighter weight box, 58.5 gram, with no recycled content. What you have to do is weigh the advantages of having recycled content, and you'll need more of that if you're going to incorporate recycled material versus a lighter weight material that has no recycled content. I want to mention life cycle assessment. This is one of the traditional ways to measure the environmental impact of the products, processes, or services. And what you have to look at is all the way from gathering the resource to manufacturing of the product, for transportation, the use, and finally the end of use. The goal is to compare the life cycle assessment of products and choose the least burdensome one. Traditionally, when we look at LCA for packaging, the 2 most common metrics that we look at is energy consumption and carbon footprint. This is very extensive and thorough analysis, but it is very expensive and time consuming. And it usually uses industry average inputs. But as soon as you make any changes to any one of those stages, what you'll do is have an outdated life cycle assessment. This is a depiction of the waste management hierarchy. We're very familiar with the 3 R's, which is reduce at the very top, reuse, and then recycle. Along with the recycle, we're coming up with compostable materials, so that is also in the hierarchy. And the second last one is recovering. So the new way of recovering some of the material is actually to recover the energy from waste. And last of all, that we don't want to do is actually put it to landfill. Very quickly, if you're looking at sustainable packaging, here's a few things that you have to consider when we look at sustainable packaging. So we talked about the 3 R's at the very top and the use of renewable source material. So what is a renewable source material? It's something that can be renewed. So trees and the use of trees to make paper and corrugate, the trees are a renewable source material. Using responsibly sourced materials. So what are examples of that? So there are various certifications, one of which is called Sustainable Forestry Initiative, and it has to do with the conservation and using the forestry in a much sustainable way, and sourcing materials from responsibly sourced forestry. Reviewing manufacturing process. So if you look at efficiencies within your manufacturing process, you automatically save energy. And again, this contributes towards sustainable packaging. Optimizing package design. A very common way of looking at that is to do a cube utilization. So designing the package so you can pack as much of the package within a given load. And if you do that and transport more of the packaged goods, then you actually reduce the carbon footprint of having more loads of the packaged goods being delivered. So that reduces the transportation impact. And again, looking at the whole distribution system, delivering goods by airplane is less sustainable and increases your carbon footprint compared to doing transportation by train or by shipping. And last of all, if you create a corporate sustainability plan, determine the metrics and your initiative and measure before and after, you can really see a great impact on your sustainability with regards to packaging. Okay, now let's look at packaging waste and the plastic issue. Plastic packaging has become very popular, and it started in the mid-1900s, and the use of it has grown. Well, why is plastic so popular? It is a very strong and lightweight material and has the ability to be molded into a variety of shapes and formats. However, improper management of plastic waste has led to plastics being discarded, disposed of, or abandoned in the environment. So we see images of marine waste in the news on a regular basis, or beaches where there's lots of plastic waste, marine animals being affected by plastic waste. The Ocean Plastic Charter was signed in June of 2018, and Canada was one of the countries that signed this charter. The charter includes working towards 100% reusable, recyclable, or recoverable plastics. So some statistics on marine waste: it's estimated that 1 million birds and over 100,000 sea mammals are injured or die when entangled in plastic or mistake it for food. I'll first talk about the EU single-use plastic ban. So on March 27th of last year, the European Parliament approved a law to ban single-use plastics by 2021, and it's entitled Single-Use Plastics Directive. What it does is put in place more responsibility for plastic producers. So who are they? Producers need to clean up the litter. Industries to include negative environmental impact labels. There's some recycling collection targets for plastic bottles. And the goal is to have 77% of the recycled plastic bottles collected by 2025 and 90% by 2029. There are also recycled content targets for plastic bottles. They're hoping for 25% by 2025 and 30% by 2030. So what are the single-use plastic ban materials that they're thinking of banning? These are the items that they're planning to ban: single-use plastic cutlery, single-use plastic plates, plastic straws, cotton bud sticks made of plastics, oxo-degradable plastics and food containers, and expanded polystyrene cups, and plastic balloon sticks. So I want to say that, we're not going to stop using this single-use cutlery, but perhaps things to look at is to use something made maybe paper-based that could be compostable, and using paper plates instead of plastic plates, using paper straws, right? And again, using paper-based or fiber-based cotton bud sticks. The particular issue with oxo-degradable plastics is that it is an additive that's put in there to cause degradation of the plastic and degradation into smaller pieces. So it actually doesn't compost the plastic. What it does is breaks it into very small pieces. And I'll talk a little bit about macro and microplastics a little bit later. But that is one of the things that is very detrimental for marine wildlife. And again, going away from plastic balloon sticks to another alternative type of material. Some other statistics from the EU: over 80 to 85% of marine litter is plastics, with single-use plastics representing 50%. Plastics that are covered under this new law ban, so this list here represents 70% of all marine litter. So what are we doing in Canada? So on June 10th of last year, our Prime Minister actually had a speech and announced the ban on single-use plastics. As of January of this year, and this is prior to the pandemic, the federal government was still on track to go forward with the ban in 2021. So some of the items that are being considered for the ban are straws, takeout containers, and grocery bag, but the final list is yet to be confirmed. Under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, it is required to have a scientific assessment of the problem first, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. So this ban intends to make plastic product manufacturers or companies using plastic packaging to take responsibility for collection and recycling of the plastic waste. This ban supports the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment's development to implement the Canada-wide strategy on zero plastic waste. I will talk about that a little bit later. It also stated that improving how plastic waste is managed and investing in innovative solutions can reduce 1.8 million tons of carbon pollution and generate billions of dollars in revenue and create many jobs. Canada has the longest coastline in the world, with 1/4 of the world's freshwater. So that's why this single-use plastic ban is very important. So in January of this year, prior to the pandemic again, the Canadian government issued a report on the draft science assessment of plastic pollution. In the report, it states that the current state of potential impacts of plastic pollution on the environment and human health, as well as a guide to future research. There is a need to reduce both the macro plastics, which are greater than 5 millimeter in diameter size plastic, and the microplastics, which are the very small particles of plastic that end up in the environment. So it has been shown that macroplastic pollution impacts organisms and their habitats by entanglement or ingestion. It is unknown, however, the effects of these microplastics on human health. Canada commissioned a study, and it was conducted from June 2nd to the 6th of this year. And it showed that 86% of Canadians want the government to continue to fulfill its commitment to ban harmful single-use plastics by 2021. And here are some statistics on that. About a third of plastics used in Canada are for single-use or short-lived products. And packaging, including up to 15 billion plastic bags used every year, and close to 57 million straws are used daily. Shopping bags, straws, plastic utensils, takeout containers make up more than a third of Canada's plastic waste. So what are the consequences of having the single-use plastic ban in Canada? Well, plastics industry is very big. There's about 35 billion in sales, which results in about $100,000 job. So what will happen with the single-use plastic ban on the plastics industry? And is it safe to replace reusable containers? And some of the initiative last year with some of the retailers saying that you could bring in your own containers for reuse. But is there a food safety issue with doing this? So overall, what is the solution to that? Well, there is a big opportunity for us in Canada to innovate and create new products that will be environmentally friendly while also bringing convenience to the Canadian consumer. Let's talk about the pandemic. Certainly that has thrown a wrench into the plans for decreasing the amount of single-use plastics. And in fact, it started to grow during the pandemic. So more use of takeout containers, more water bottles, other wrap items, because they were wary of the virus, and then lots of medical waste. It is a shame that I do see those disposable masks being littered even in my neighborhood. So it seems like the efforts to reduce plastic consumption has come to a halt or even reversed, especially in the food sector. So in the EU, there were calls by the plastic industry to lift this ban on some of the single-use plastics because more were being consumed due to health and hygiene concerns from COVID. But the European Commission states that the deadlines will have to be respected. On September 23rd of this year, the speech from the throne given by our Governor General of Canada, Julie Payette, stated that we will proceed with the ban of harmful single-use plastics in 2021, and that we have to ensure more plastic is being recycled and to modernize the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. So although we have the pandemic and extra use, the government and many others feel that it is still important to go ahead with this. There was an excellent report given by Sylvain Charlebois and the whole Agri-Food Analytics Lab in Dalhousie University. And this report was called Plastic Food Packaging Before and After COVID. The study was conducted between July 10th and 14th, and a survey was issued and questions were asked to Canadians. The results show, and this is some of the results, that 29% feel that they are buying more plastic packaged food goods during the pandemic, and this is not surprising. 40% of those surveyed consider new safety concerns during the pandemic to be either very important or extremely important to buying plastic packaged goods. There was a survey conducted in May of last year, and it showed that 90% were in support of strong regulations on plastic, and 70% wanted to see single-use plastics banned. But the survey this year showed that those numbers have dropped to 79% and 58% respectively. So this is a study that was conducted last year, and it was issued by the Environment and Climate Change Canada in 2019, and this report is called the Economic Study of the Canadian Plastics Industry, Markets, and Waste. It goes through the entire life cycle view from production of virgin resin to end-of-life plastic waste. So some of the conclusions from this are that the main sector for plastic waste is packaging, 43%. The recycling industry focused on the major plastics, which are PET, high-density polyethylene, low-density polyethylene, and polypropylene. And that's what's located predominantly in the large end markets of Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia. Value recovery options are competing against the low costs of landfilling. So it's more cost-effective to landfill as opposed to trying to recover the material. Key barrier to recovery of plastics include low diversion rate, only 25% being collected, process loss in sorting and reprocessing stages, recovery options for hard to recycle plastics, what to do with those kind of plastics. Contributions to low diversion rate include product design, collection mechanism, collection from ICI, and that's industrial, commercial, and institutional sector, infrastructure, regulatory, economic, and price signals. Here is the depiction of the Canadian resin flows and from data in 2016, and the numbers are on there are in thousands of tons per annum. What's very interesting about this study is that 87% of plastic waste ends up in the landfill or leaked into the environment. So I thought that there would be a larger amount of recycling, but there's only 9% that is of the plastics being recycled within Canada. And this is in both ways, mechanical and chemical. And the difference is mechanical means taking the plastic, collecting, sorting, cleaning, and melting and repurposing it into another material. Chemical recycling is bringing it down and breaking it down to the monomers and then creating new plastic from that. And what's interesting and an emerging option is incineration with energy recovery, and that's currently at 4%. I wanted to show you this because these are the options that are available for solid waste. So what should we be doing with our waste? What is being done? Recycling, I talked about that, chemical and mechanical. Composting, and people are doing at home, but there's also industrial composting. But this requires aerobic composting. So what you need is bacteria and heat, and you need the presence of oxygen in order for that bacteria to break down the materials and make compost from that. The other option for the waste, solid waste, is waste to energy. And there's several ways of doing it. There's anaerobic digestion called biogasification, gasification, which converts to carbon monoxide and hydrogen, and incineration and capturing that energy from the burning the waste. And the last thing we want to do is have landfill. And I want to elaborate more on that because that is an anaerobic environment. And what do I mean by anaerobic? It lacks in oxygen. Landfilling, it is a low-cost option. So that is why a lot of the waste goes to landfill. Canadians throw away more than 34 million plastic bags every day that wind up in landfills and take more than 1,000 years for them to decay. So one of the options for materials instead of plastic is using bio-based materials. So why should we develop bio-based materials for packaging? Well, the use of plants actually will reduce carbon footprints. And the reason why is because plants consume in their respiration carbon dioxide. It also uses a renewable resource, and we talked about that in plant-based compared to petroleum-based materials that are not renewable. And last of all, we want to talk about the alternate end-of-life scenario. So what do we do with it? Can it degrade or can it be recycled? So these are two different approaches to using bio-based materials. On the left, you'll see compostable coffee pods. And if used in a well-managed municipal composting, it will take about 5 weeks to decompose. So all the materials, the lid, the ring, and of course the coffee contained within the pods are biodegradable. The key to be using or trying to design compostable materials is to not only use the ASTM method for compostability, but to actually do some trials at your local municipality. Each municipality has a different way of composting. So if something like this is being introduced across Canada, there should be real life trials at composting facilities in order to make sure that that material is actually going to compost in an industrial setting. The depiction on the right is 2 PET bottles, and what this is from Coca-Cola is a recyclable plant bottle. Why is it called a plant bottle? Because 30% of that material is made from a renewable resource. So sugarcane, which is grown mainly in South America, and that sugar can be made into ethanol and ethylene and made into polyethylene, which is one of the components to make this PET material. What is good about that is it uses a renewable resource, but it also is fully functional and as strong as virgin PET material made from petroleum-based sources. So again, it's 100% recyclable, but as well, it has the physical properties that you need from this PET material. One of the things you have to consider about compostable packaging is the implication of this going to landfill. So I am going to talk a little bit of science and the science of biodegradation, right? So when you have a food, and we talk about food as a compostable packaging material, and you have microorganisms, it is possible to biodegrade or compost that packaging material. If you have oxygen and water, and what will happen in the presence of oxygen is you will actually create water, carbon dioxide, some heat, and some compostable material, composting material. So this is what we call aerobic composting, and that is what is done in composting facilities in different municipalities. However, if you take that compostable material and it doesn't go into a composting facility, what will happen is it will go to landfill. And in the absence of oxygen, what you're going to generate when it degrades is carbon dioxide, methane, the compost material, and a little bit of heat. And we call this anaerobic digestion, or what happens in a landfill. So when you look at this, if the compostable material is not put in a compostable environment, but in the landfill, because it's not sorted properly or it's not put into a compost facility and it goes to landfill, methane is 25 times the strength as a greenhouse gas compared to carbon dioxide. So you're actually increasing or contributing to the problem of greenhouse gas emissions when this compostable material is put into landfill. Let me talk about the challenges of recycling. So what happens during recycling? Well, collection is the first stage, and then what they have to do is sort, clean and process that, and it is manufactured and made into other material, and then consumers purchase the new product that is made from the recycled material. But this is a very challenging business. If anyone has ever been to a recycling facility, yes, there are optical sorters, but that's typically used in the secondary sort, but it is very labor intensive. And you can see by this depiction on the right-hand side, there are workers on either side of a fast-moving conveyor belt, and the materials quickly go down this conveyor belt, and the workers pull off what they feel is recyclable and non-recyclable. So again, you know, this cost of running recycling programs is very labor intensive and hence expensive. And the other thing I want to note is the only way they can distinguish visually between what is recyclable and is not is to look at it and recognize that laundry detergent containers are made of high density polyethylene. Soda bottles, water bottles are made from PET. And so by visually looking at that, they can sort it properly, and hence those two materials are the most easily recyclable. Items such as clamshells may go to secondary sort to try and recover that material. We're going to talk about the lower commodity prices in my next few slides. In Canada, there's also an insufficient number of processing facilities, which makes it very challenging. We've been sending it to China and other Asian countries, but that is now slowed down, and I'll talk about that. So we're sending more of the material to landfill. The other challenge is that, you know, in recycling, they're looking for higher quality of product and not contaminated by food. So this means there are fewer items being accepted for recycling. There was a really good series of talks or sections of news delivered by Global News last April. So Global News had this 3-part series on the recycling industry in Canada. What it states is that China and other Asian countries are banning or restricting Canada's recycling materials. And one item that made the news is loads of garbage or recycled material that was sent back from the Philippines. After China stopped accepting much of the world's recycling in 2018, the market was flooded with product, and this has also caused the prices to drop. So this is kind of small, but what I wanted to show you is how it shifted. So when we look at the paper and the export market for recycling, you see that China was a big export market for recycled paper in 2016. And you can see in 2018 that it has dropped dramatically. And that's the same with plastics, right? So China used to be a bigger part of that, and now China and all the other Asian countries are restricting the export of this recycled plastics into their country. On the right-hand side, what you'll see is the impact of that and how it has changed the pricing of recycled materials. So this is the Ontario monthly averages of cost drops from August 2017 to January 2019. So you can see that mixed paper has dropped in pricing by 110%, corrugated cardboard by 50%, film plastic by 53%, aluminum cans by 23%. There's been a slight increase in pricing for commodities such as PET and steel cans. So what's the future of recycling? So we believe that extended producer responsibility is the way to go, or EPR. What is this? It makes companies who actually produce, manufacture, packaging sells a product or imports product collected in blue bins, and it pays, and they are responsible for paying to recycle the package. They help with some of the costs. So if you can see the picture on the right, Ontario actually is 100% producer funded, but it is operated by municipalities. You can see other provinces are less funded, you know, including Manitoba, and I see, sorry, Quebec is 100% producer funded, but Ontario is only 50%. My apologies on that. But there has been great success in BC, which has the highest recycling rate of 69%. And it is producer funded and operated. And they've done great strides in the last few years to make that a success. So mandating packaging containing recycled content could spur the recycle industry. So one of the mandates that our Prime Minister had said when he mentioned about single plastics ban is that we should aim for zero plastic waste. And again, this is from the economic study of the Canadian plastics industry by the government, and it talks about circular economy. So what does that mean? Well, there's an ambitious scenario for 2030 in which 90% of the landfill is diverted. There's an increase in mechanical and chemical recycling and energy from waste, which deals with remaining volumes and hard to recycle plastics. So we're talking about trying to divert this plastic waste from landfill. So how can we achieve that? It's with strategic interventions by government, industry stakeholders, and the public at each stage of the plastic life cycle. So what are the things that we have to do as a country? Create viable domestic secondary end markets. Everyone has to be on board to collect all the plastics. We need to support and expand all value recovery options. We need to increase efficiency throughout the value chain. And last of all, extend the plastic lifetime to reduce and delay waste generation. We come from a very disposable society these days, but if we were to create things that had a longer shelf life and plastic lifetime, there'll be less plastic waste. So let me talk about some future trends when we're talking about sustainable packaging. Well, sustainability, as I've been talking all about, is very complex. It's not simple to say, well, this is the package we're going to, it's going to be more sustainable, because it doesn't work for all parts of Canada, it doesn't work for all food types. And so you have to do a lot of testing of the primary, secondary packaging, looking at the shelf life, looking at transportation and the implications of storage and transportation to make sure that that package is not only sustainable, but also functions as it should with physical and barrier properties. Because if there are damaged goods, again, you are creating more food waste as well as packaging waste. And as you can see, it is evolving. So what are some of the future trends? Well, we should be diverting more waste from the landfill. So how can we do that? One of the ways to do that is to promote consumer education. So on the right-hand side, there you see a label, and the Green Blue organization is coming up with labels that will create consumer education and make sure that the consumer knows how to handle this. In this case, it is a plastic bottle, and on the label, it's asking that it be emptied and you replace the cap in order for that plastic bottle to be recycled. How can we divert waste from landfill? We can also increase material recovery. So if we have novel marking and better sorting techniques, we can capture more of that waste. during the and recover more material for recycling. The biggest issue right now, when it comes to packaging, one of the biggest issues is flexible packaging, and that's used to make pouches. And what is good about that is very lightweight material, but it is made out of many different kinds of materials, so it isn't as easy to recycle as materials, as packaging that is made from only one type of material. So what we need to do is, how can we take all that pouch and flexible packaging material from waste and divert that? And one of the other options is actually capturing the energy. And I talked about energy from waste. There are new and emerging technologies in this area. What are some of the innovations and technology that's being developed? So a big area of research is bio-based polymer development. So instead of using food as a base, such as sugar and sugar cane, which is a food, to create bio-based polymers, why don't we use something such as bacteria? So if you collect the bacteria from methane or solid waste, there's some research that shows that you can actually make some bio-based polymers using this bacteria. Also, if you look at potato processing and the waste and the starch that is being generated within the wash water, it has been shown that that starch can be recovered and made into bio-based polymers. We talked about the plant bottle and Coca-Cola using 30% renewable material. The idea with Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, and other companies is to actually make it 100% plant-based. So they are working on that right now. So making conventional plastics from a renewable resource. And the last is edible packaging. So on the right-hand side, you can see people running in a marathon. And this was a London marathon, London in the UK. And instead of using single-use plastic cups to hold an energy drink or water, they were putting that in these edible packaging pods. And so the runners of the marathon will be grabbing that and popping the entire packet into their mouth and eating the entire package and consuming the contents of the package. So we need to come up with innovative solutions for sustainable packaging, and these are some examples. So I have some closing remarks. Plastic waste is a global issue, and it is affecting wildlife and the environment. The pandemic, however, has temporarily sidelined the initiative to ban single-use plastics. Waste management is under pressure, but it's still important to continue the efforts to reduce waste. The government and organizations have a call to action to greatly reduce plastic packaging waste. Philosophies such as the circular economy and zero waste will require a shift in the way we think about waste. But issues such as consumer awareness, thoughtful packaging material design and choices, government industry support, and innovation will all be critical factors in creating the changes necessary to address the plastic packaging waste issue. Thank you very much for your attention today. Here is my contact information. I am also one of the packaging experts at SIAL. So I do welcome questions now, and you can also send me questions through the Packaging Expert Hub. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. That was very interesting as usual. I have a question. I was very surprised by the low number of plastic recycled. And it's been like maybe I'm 48 years old, and I always been maybe since the age of 10 to recycle everything. So I don't understand why it's that low. I should have maybe see it around 50%, but what is there an obligation possible to create for any companies?
Yes, so that's a very interesting. I thought it would be higher too, but we're talking all of Canada. And the recycling is actually governed by the municipalities. So it's not by, although the federal government can say this is what we are aiming towards, it's really up to each municipality to do the collection and deal with the waste. And in large cities and centers, it is easier to do that. So in Ontario, we have the Blue Box. In Quebec, they have a collection system. Same with BC. But in smaller communities where they don't have perhaps, door-to-door pickup of recycled material, they don't have a lot of money to collect, to also sort and process. And then you have to think about who will actually take that recycled material and sell it. So yes, I agree that it seems low, but it's not surprising if you look at remote areas and smaller municipalities.
Okay. For everyone, you can ask questions, as I said, on the chat if you want, and I will ask the question, Carol, if you need any clarification of the presentation. In your point of view, Carol, and in the meantime, we will have maybe another question. How do you think it's going to be successful at the end to recycle 100% of the plastic, whatever it is?
Yeah, well, I think, well, two things. With the single-use plastic ban, that issue requires innovation, right? So getting away from the use of plastics and looking at alternate materials to get away from the single-use plastic ban. With regards to the entire plastic waste issue, what people have to do, I mean, there's several things that have to do, like doing the design of it properly, right? In order to make that material recyclable. Education of the consumer, better collection and processing. And one of the other thing is actually, the end use market. If there is more innovation to have an end use market for some of this recycled material, then it will cause a demand for recycled material, and therefore, an outlet for that. So there's many things that could be done in order to increase the amount of recovery and recycling.
Okay, I have a question for you. Are there technologies or ways of doing things that we could adopt from the EU countries or companies?
Oh, yes, actually, they do a lot of reusable. So actually, we've come a long way. We do follow the EU. One of the things they do is collect and reuse containers. We're doing a great job with the glass beer bottles, and that is kind of a model, right? So if you buy liquor or beer in glass containers and other kind of containers, you're able to return it and get money from that. So that kind of idea really promotes the reuse. And beer bottles can be used up to 15 times. And they have extended this to plastics and other materials in Europe. So that's something that's very helpful. I just want to talk about actually the use of, the way we've been trained as a society to return the beer bottles for deposit. And we're talking predominantly about Ontario. It used to be that only beer bottles were returned, but people were putting liquor bottles, glass bottles, into the blue bin. What happens is that when it's collected and dumped, a lot of that glass is broken. And once that's broken and shattered, it is very difficult to take that glass bottle and recycle pieces of it. So by having the beer store actually collect that and have a deposit on that and get consumers get money back, what happens is that it is delivered intact in one piece and brought right to the recycling facility. And this has actually increased the amount of recycling for glass bottles.
Interesting. I have two more questions. Do you think relying on 100% recycled or reissued plastics is going to be a realistic goal someday? And just because we are so used to it as consumers right now?
So the use of recycled material into food, it's right now it's diverted into many non-food items. So we take some of the plastic and make it into, plastic composite lumber or clothing or carpet. There are some really good initiatives being done. Ice River, which is a water bottle company, is actually taking post-consumer water bottles, cleaning it, and we have to make sure there's no contamination from food or other items, and cleaning it to the point that it could be reused back into water bottles. So I think that is also another novel, way of reusing recycled material back into food containers.
Okay. Another question, what percentage of compost facilities accept compostable packaging? Do any accept them in Canada?
Well, and that is the thing with this compost facility. In the past, a long time ago, and I can't remember what year, Frito-Lay introduced this very noisy packaging that was supposed to be compostable. Because the municipalities didn't know that that was compostable, two things, they would pull it out. So the people at the compost facilities think it is plastic, right? So they have to be trained and educated on what materials are compostable. So things like the coffee pods and the compost bags that you put in, lining the bins for your compost, they're recognized as compost. But it is very difficult sometimes for the municipalities to recognize materials as compostability material, and they don't want to contaminate their compost stream. So it is difficult. It has to be recognized by all the municipalities.
I've got a comment made by one of the participants. In Vienna, Austria, we have a good system of incineration while heating a part of the city. Something to look at it. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think that's very great. In fact, countries in Europe and also in, Japan, where they have very little space for landfilling, they go to its incineration. In North America, there is a stigma with incineration and recovery from energy, and they feel that many of the public feel that this contributes to air pollution, and there's a big stigma with incineration. But with the technology nowadays to clean and scrub the emissions to prevent air pollution and the recovery from energy, I think it's a very good option. So good for you, for the countries in Europe that are doing that. Thank you for the comment.
Yeah, I've got another last question. How about biodegradable plastics? And that would be the last question.
Yeah, biodegradable plastics are good if they serve a function, but also if they go into the compost stream. If they don't and they go to landfill, you can create methane, and methane is a more powerful greenhouse gas compared to carbon dioxide. So again, you're exacerbating the problem with that. So
yeah, so thank you, Carol. That was very nice to have you on board in this conference. As you have said just at the end, you could visit Carol's expert virtual booth to ask her any more question that you want in the SIAL expertise hall, and she will be there to answer everything. I remind every one of our audience that this conference will be available on our YouTube SIAL TV channel and on our virtual show. I'm sorry, it's in the replay conferences section in the menu. Thanks everyone. Thanks Cara for your time, and thanks everyone for your support. And have a great virtual visit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.